Good morning. Sorry about the lack of seats. I see one seat right there in the middle if someone would like it. Any takers? So we'll make do. There's some more seats kind of on the floor up here in the front. Sorry. Let's get started. So, welcome to the first ever, the inaugural Best Advice Alternative Convocation Program. In a few minutes, I will introduce our incredibly distinguished guests. But before I do that, let me give you some background for the event. This past summer, I had a pretty interesting conversation with a good friend of mine. It was over breakfast, we were just chatting, and he asked me, what advice would you give to a current Gordon College student? He went to Gordon, I went to Gordon, we were roommates here. I have no idea what I said, but I thought that could be a really fun conversation to have, particularly with a panel. So out of that, we have this event. The logistics of the event are this. Our panelists can be either faculty or staff. And so they're faculty or staff, period, end of sentence. So this is how it will work for today's event. They each will share, I gave them this simple prompt. What is the best advice you've ever given? Or what is the best advice you've ever received? That's it. Very open-ended question. I believe they all wrote something, but they at least will all tell you their best advice, their best piece of advice. So each of the panelists will go, then we'll have a time for question and answer. All right? So far, so good? Any questions? Side note, we hope this is very conversational. I realize there's a lot of you here. This is a big room, but we want lots of interaction here. So if you do have questions, feel free to ask them. Okay? Great. I will now introduce our panelists, but I should mention there will be a prize giveaway at some point through this event, so you may want to pay attention to some of these details. That's all I'm going to say. Ooh. Okay. Our first panelist, Jerry Logan. They wrote these bios, by the way. I did not. Jerry Logan went to Gordon, worked at Gordon, and now also teaches at Gordon. Somewhere in that span, he found time to get his MED in Higher Education Administration from the College of William & Mary, where he spent long hours in the college archives, drank a lot of coffee, and went for a lot of long runs in the woods. He has watched nearly every Atlanta Braves game this year, and his wife hates him for that. Our next guest is Bryan Parys. Bryan went to Gordon, worked at Gordon, and now also teaches at Gordon. Somewhere in that span, he found time to get his MFA in creative nonfiction writing from the University of New Hampshire, where he wrote a book, drank a lot of tea, and grew a lot of hot peppers on his porch. He has missed absolutely every Atlanta Braves game this year. Our last guest, and very possibly the most intelligent of our three, is definitely the most intelligent of the three, is Joan Wendt, or Joni, as she goes by. Her mom worked at Gordon. Her sister graduated from Gordon. She graduated from Gordon not too long ago and now works at Gordon. Her 15-year-old daughter hopes one day to also go to Gordon. She has a 10-year-old Siberian Husky, spends most of her time chauffeuring her teenager, and loves to watch her daughter horseback ride. She loves to bake, sew, swim, and most definitely is the atlas of the Department of Music. Do we have any students or people from the music department here? Is that true? Can we attest that? That's very true. Okay, great. Well, let's get started. Jerry?
All right. Hello, hello, hello. Is that on?
You're good. Yeah.
It sounds like it's on. Can you guys hear me? In the back? Baljin? Yeah, all right, here we go. I want to start with a little show and tell because I deeply, deeply miss elementary school working at a college. It's just a bit too complex for me. This is one of my most treasured possessions. And it is kind of it's where I went when Keith asked me to participate in this panel. This my girlfriend at the time gave me when I was graduating from Gordon. She approached all of the significant male figures in my life, and she said, would you just write a letter to Jerry, give him some advice, give him some encouragement as he's going forward into life, and I'll put them all in this spot. She knew I needed a lot of help, and so she figured she'd do that. She then married me, so she she got to give me even more help than she bargained for at the time. Anyways, when I was asked to speak on the best advice I ever received, I kind of went to this book because I keep coming back to these words that these mentors have had in my life. There are great letters in here: my dad, my brother, my best friends, 3 coaches, my granddad, and I think that covers it. All of them Christians except one, which is my high school basketball coach. And I'm actually going to speak on a piece of advice that he gave me. And so the very first thing I always remember is when I find myself reading too much Lewis, or when I find myself talking to a bunch of Christians, that Christians don't have a corner on the wisdom market. Because I keep coming back to his advice more than anyone else's. He knew that I was a thinker rather than a feeler. He knew that before my feet would move anywhere in life, my mind would move a lot beforehand. So he told me, the piece of advice I want to share with you is that you're always ready and you're never ready for the next big step in life. There are 2 sides to that coin. So the first is that you're always ready. And here I'm going to insert the cheap plug for the Christian liberal arts, because it really does teach you kind of these foundational things: critical thinking, good communication skills. I think a moral authority is very important when you go out into the world, to hold yourself to a higher standard, and then to interact with people who know that you hold yourself to that standard. And then to give you perspective, looking at different disciplines, different cultures, so that you kind of develop this temperate personality rather than a reactive personality. I think those are huge things that prepare you and that will mean you're always ready for the next big step in life. The most important thing for me, being a thinker, though, was the second part, which is you're never ready. I've found a lot of freedom in that idea. Freedom to fail, freedom to say, I don't know, which is actually enormously freeing to be able to look at someone and say, yeah, I don't know. Freedom to make mistakes, freedom to dream. And perhaps most importantly for me, whose mind is always working, always considering all the possibilities before I do anything, freedom to act when it's not the right time. So I've learned that there's really never a good time for the next big step, and that you should just go ahead and make it. Let me now consult my notes. The greatest comfort for me, too, has been seeing other people who I love and respect kind of embrace this idea. So when I came to Gordon, we'll rewind real quickly. Before every big step I've made, I've actually thought specifically of those words. You're always ready and you're never ready. So before I got married, before I went to grad school, before I started applying for jobs, when I would look at job descriptions and say, I can't do that, well, I'd say, yeah, no one can do that. Just go ahead and apply. When I got some of those jobs, much to my dismay, and said, oh, now I have to actually do those things, it was still a comfort to know, oh, it's okay, you're not fully ready, but you have the skills that will enable you to figure out how to prepare yourself, how to get those things done. When I came here to work in the provost's office, Mark Sargent, if most of you remember him, was the provost. He was very intimidating because he's like a super genius, smart, interpersonal. He just felt like a genius on every level, almost deity-like. Can I say that here? Yes, he felt like that to me. I would walk into his office, I would see all the books that he's read, or I'd see him interact with people, I'd hear them talk about him, and I'd say, oh no, I have to report to this guy. Eventually, though, along the way, there was kind of this humanizing process, and I started to learn, oh, okay, he's kind of like the rest of us. And he told me this story that I want to leave you with that, for me, is the perfect illustration of being always ready and never ready. And in the process, I realized, hey, maybe one day I can kind of get to where he's at, because he embraces this same ideal. He lives by it. He's aware of it, and he's climbed kind of the ranks. He told me when he earned his first vice president of academic affairs job, which is kind of the equivalent of provost, second in command to the president. He was at a school in the Midwest. His first day on the job, the president's out of town, so he's kind of in command. He gets a call, and the voice on the other end of the line says, "The buffalo are loose." He thinks, okay, is this code for the faculty? Are they on the warpath? Should I start to barricade my office? What's going on? He figures out, no, there are actual buffalo on the neighboring property who are now on the loose on campus. Nothing in his previous tenure, wherever he was, whatever he learned, whatever grad school he did, prepare you for the moment when someone calls and says, there are buffalo roaming around your property. But at the same time, he must have figured it out because there were no news stories about students dying trampled by buffaloes. He ended up at Gordon. I'm sure if students got trampled by buffalo under your watch, you wouldn't have ended up at Gordon. So he figured it out. He was somehow ready to gather all the information, make the right decision, wait on the animal control people to guide those buffalo back, seal up the fence, and live to see another day. So my encouragement, my best advice is that you're always ready and you're never ready for whenever the buffalo are on the loose in your life. You'll somehow know what to do.
Next up is Bryan Parys. I would encourage you all to nonstop tweet at Bryan Harris for about the next 10 minutes. Just send really discouraging comments. And really just, no, I'm just kidding. At Bryan Harris.
It's okay because I don't have a smartphone, so I'll be safe until I go back and then I huddled mass in my office and cry. So, but for now, the picture of confidence.
Parys with a Y, by the way.
Yes.
Parys with a Y.
Well, I'm talking about Twitter, so there you go. So a little foreshadowing. No buffalo injuries in mine, so I'm kind of jealous. All right. So I thought about this advice thing we found out, in the summer, we found out we were going to do this. And I've been thinking about that, and not until yesterday did I even come up with anything to say. And I went through this existential, postmodern, all those cliche words that you get in college, crisis, to come up with something that said, yeah, that thing, that line, that shaped a significant part of who I am today. Couldn't do it. You know, it's like pointing to a ripple in a lake and being like, oh yeah, that was the first wave, you know. So I couldn't come up with anything. And so then I was talking to a friend yesterday, and my memory jogged and got back to something, and I was like, yes, in fact, I can name the day and the exact time that this advice I'm going to talk about today was told to me. And that's not because it's that important or because I have a really exceptional memory, but it was on Twitter. So I can tell you that it was at 11:07 a.m. on March 14th, 2012. So that's not that long ago. And normally when you think of advice, you think of this thing that, you know, I kept thinking like, oh, my dad was smart, but I can't think of anything that he said that really is, that I'm handling. It's like, don't lie. You know, that's pretty good, I guess. Thanks, Dad. You know, I follow that, but it didn't seem to really land the way that Jerry's did and that Joni's will. So this is sort of retroactive advice and something that sort of read into my past as I came up with it. So what happened was a friend of mine on Twitter had been on a hiatus. I don't know if it was intentional, but he wasn't tweeting for a little bit. I'm going to say the words tweeting and Twitter a lot, which I die a little every time I say it out loud, but just bear with me. He came back to Twitter, and I welcomed him and said, what news from the outside? Tell us, you know, do you have any wisdom? And he said back very kindly, he said, nothing you haven't already thought of, surely. And then, in quotes, sort of, I assume, pretending to speak in my voice, he said, what is happening immediately around me is engaging. And I read that, and I was like, oh, that's a really cool thing. What, you know, wouldn't it be great to be a person that was immediately engaged with everything that came to in life? And I was like, oh, wait a minute. He's saying that I am like that. And then I was like, oh, I hope I am. That'd be really great. So in a sense, what I'm seeing as advice, and I'll get to more of that in a second, is actually a really nice compliment. So in Twitter language, this is called humble bragging. Is anyone familiar with humble brag? You've seen this account if you're on Twitter? Okay, silence is good. It means that I'm not the old dude that is barely connected. So humble bragging is the art of false modesty. So it's when you include you're tweeting something and you're saying like something that you're complaining about, or that something bad has happened to you in some minor way. But the situation that you're involved in is something that most people don't get the chance to. So as an example for right now, it would be if you're, on a day that you're supposed to speak in front of lots of students at a college, make sure your socks match. They don't, so I forgot about that. But that's a humble brag in the sense that I'm saying, oh, look at me, I'm so human, but I've also been invited to speak to a large mass of people. So there's a whole account on Twitter called Humble Brag that collects things from around Twitter. It's typically people that are connected with Hollywood or the entertainment industry or fame in some way. So I have a couple examples that I'll just read out that I think are good examples of humble bragging. So here's one from someone named Totes McGoats. That awkward moment when you need to shower the massage oil off from your previous massage before you go to your next massage. Why is it every time I have a softball game, someone walks up to me and says, "Are you on roids? Ha ha, dude, I don't even lift weights." So just that strong naturally. Good. Good for you. In Lyon, France, Paris tomorrow. So jet-lagged, though. What to do? Why does the Mercedes dealership always have fresh-baked hot cookies? Don't they understand how mean that is? Also trying to figure out what career I should go for when I'm done. Schooling will be a must. I have no college. Ugh, stupid modeling. All right, so those are some examples of that. So basically the advice I'm giving you is a humble brag because it's a friend of mine saying, hey man, I don't have much to offer you because you're so immediately impressed with everything that's around you. So with that sort of humble brag note, I'll continue on with this. What happened was that it actually was good advice because I hadn't realized that about how I sort of perceive the world. And as a writer, and in all my conversations and everything, that is the through line. It's a very astute assessment of how I go about life. And it really sort of galvanized the work I was doing at the time, which all those many months ago in March. But it sort of, in a hindsight way, trickled back through my past. So it's sort of a retroactive advice in that rather than saying, here's this quote I got when I was 9 and it colored the rest of my existence, it's now saying, okay, here's this thing I just got not that long ago, but it's actually helping me make sense of how I perceive the world and why I think it might actually be important for other people to see the importance of that. So I had one line that I was thinking of while I was thinking about this idea, and it says that the tragedies of the past don't have a thing on the inspiration of the present. And I think we can probably debate that. I mean, the tragedy can be a pretty huge thing, and maybe the inspiration of the falling leaves isn't going to be enough to cover some major tragedy. But there's this idea that there's so much sparkling animation in the world around us that, for me, I can't ignore it. And a lot of people just say that I have a pretty short attention span. But I like to think of it as being constantly inspired. And in poetic terms, there's a movement of poetry called the ecstatic movement. And I think this helps sort of explain this a little bit. One poet describes this as the self-dissolving in ecstatic poetry. The poem is a ladder that the reader climbs. The poem is a lightning bolt. In a brilliant flash of light, ecstatic experience changes you. This is often described as an awakening. And I think that extends beyond poetry. I mean, for me, it's like the sound and smell of onions cooking down in butter, or seeing a turkey vulture glide up and down a mountain in what seems like seconds, or that first sip of water in the morning when your stomach is empty, and you literally feel it just completely wake you up and you feel your insides. I mean, when do you get to do that? Not much. So for me, it's literally everything. I'm surprised I haven't gotten in more car accidents because there's so many things on either side that I want to see and validate and point to. So this is why I write these unending flashes. And if you can see yourself in that and get into this mode of constant awakening, I think that you're just going to run through and do great work. So this is why I write. It's also why I'm not on Facebook, because it ends up being too much. I don't want to hear about your baby throwing up again, because that doesn't inspire me, right? I don't know. Maybe it does for you, though.
At Bryan, Parys. Last but certainly not least, Joni Wendt.
So when I was asked to do this talk, I went to many people and said, so what's your best advice? What's the best advice you ever received? And I spoke to many people, and a good friend of mine helped me think about what I wanted to write to talk to you about today. And he is fairly recent graduate of Gordon, and he said, don't preach. He said, I think you should tell a story. So my presentation's a little different from what you've already heard, but this is a story that happened to me, and I just want to share it with you, and you glean from it what you will, okay? So I am the youngest of 3 children. My siblings are 8 and 10 years my senior. My mother gave birth to me when she was 40. I'm told that my arrival and presence brought great joy to my middle-aged parents. My mother often claimed that I kept them young. I was named after a family friend, Joan, a missionary in Thailand. Joan means God is gracious. My parents' actions faithfully communicated to me how much they loved and cherished me. They were indeed grateful to God for the gift that they had been given. There are definite benefits to being the youngest, and in some respects, the only child. I was often granted permission or leeway that would not have been given to my brother or sister. Of course, this infuriated them. The downside was that because of this leeway, I sometimes took the path of least resistance. People who knew me as a child say that I walk through life with a smile, a light step, and cheerful conversation. As they reflect on my family, they note that I'm just like my dad and refer to me as Little Charlie. Some say that I am the apple of his eye. We share a bond as we are much alike in looks and personality. He and I have a fair complexion, bright blue eyes, a joy for life, optimistic perspective, integrity, a knack for problem solving, love of work, and willingness to serve. I have stacked many cords of wood for him in my younger years. Most of my Saturdays were devoted to my dad's project list. He and I are happiest when we have a project that keeps us physically busy. My mother, on the other hand, seemed different from us. Her olive complexion was in sharp contrast to ours. She was petite in stature with strong, capable hands. She was slow to speak and mostly spoke what was necessary, truthful, or helpful. As a woman of strong faith, she spoke encouraging words of Christ's love and grace to the needy. She was pensive, quiet, even melancholic. She was also a bookworm. Our contrasts were significant for me. It created a barrier between us. That said, Mom could ruffle my feathers in a way like no one else, pushing me to look at the hard areas in my life. It was hard to hear those things. She often questioned why I took the easy road and not the road that would challenge me. I struggled to understand her, and I couldn't always relate to her, but I knew that she loved me very much. Now, Mom was the best cook, not a gourmet cook, but one who could transform simple ingredients into a delicious and hearty meal. There was never a quick meal. She lovingly prepared each dish as her gift to us, truly nourishing us. My parents generously shared their meager means with many. They fed the forgotten, the lonely, and those who did not know Jesus. Mom used her gifts of cooking and baking to reach out to many. Her pot roast, Swedish meatballs, chicken pot pie made their way into many homes. There was hardly a Sunday that a family from church, a visiting preacher, or a missionary didn't join us for lunch. Dad and Mom and I would entertain the guests, and she would put the finishing touches on the meal. As I helped her place the generous servings on the table, I marveled that everything was prepared from scratch. Nothing was picked up at the deli, nothing was microwaved. The memory of her hospitality, heaped up and spilling over, is still fresh in my mind 35 years later. The meal would be topped off with a freshly baked dessert. She was famous for her apple pie. And everyone would ooh and ah as the pie was brought to the table. It was a beautiful sight to behold. The dome was golden brown and coated with sugar. She would top each slice with a dollop of ice cream, a slice of cheddar cheese. Many more groans of delight would follow. These are my memories from my teenage years. My participation in the cooking and entertaining was never voluntary, though I did delight in the feast. There were other interests that I would have preferred to have pursued on a Sunday afternoon. I was beginning the natural process of becoming an individual, an adult. Like most teenagers, I had no need to learn how to cook or entertain. And certainly I did not want to learn this from my mother. I would have to confront this barrier that was between us. I would opt for the easy way out, the path of least resistance. Certainly a good cookbook could contain all that I'd eventually need to know. I mean, how hard could it be to bake an apple pie? But little did I know that God was about to present me with an invitation to see things differently. He was about to open my eyes to the wealth of wisdom that surrounded me. I was soon to be challenged with a choice. In the late summer of 1972, my mother fell while picnicking on the rocky coast that is near our home. She took a significant hit on the head. She returned from the emergency room with her head bandaged. The visual of my physically and mentally vulnerable mother garnered my full attention. God helped me to see that she would not be with me forever. I could no longer take her for granted. I had a sense of recklessness that I had squandered the earlier opportunities with her. Instantly, I recognized that there was so much I needed to know from her, even how to cook. I realized that I should seize every moment to absorb her ways, to seek her perspective, and to understand how God used her talents and gifts to love her for who she was and for all that she did on behalf of others. I would have to put myself in a vulnerable place. I would have to walk the unfamiliar path of spending time with my mother. I could no longer walk the path of least resistance with her. It would not be easy, and it would not be comfortable. It was time for this barrier to come down. On Thanksgiving morning that year, I got up uncharacteristically early. My mother was just finishing her quiet time. I asked her if I could help her prepare the Thanksgiving meal. I asked her to show me, to enlighten me. Imagine her shock and delight. Step by step, she began to inventory the details for the preparation of the meal. She explained the reasoning for why she did what she did. There were instances where she chose to do a process a certain way as it would please your father, or isn't that the way you prefer it? Or it's the family tradition. We peeled and sliced apples, prepared and rolled out pie dough, mixed stuffing, creamed the onions, basted the bird, and most importantly, she taught me how to make gravy. All the while, she imparted her cooking tips. Some were forged from her own missteps, others drafted by her personal taste and design. Through this process, I began to have a better understanding of her. I began to learn from her. The wall that had separated us didn't seem insurmountable. I saw that I could walk down this uncharted path with her. She and I turned a corner in our relationship. It was truly a day of Thanksgiving, a day of Thanksgiving. I'm so grateful that God gave me this chance. Mom was 53. She died when she was 78. I was given many years to learn from her. So this narrative that I have shared with you was not advice that was given to me, but I gleaned this reflection from my early experiences with my parents. And there have been many more opportunities where I have been redirected, where a better path has been chosen. And I'm very clear that God will continue to use these forks in the road to challenge me to grow.
Thanks, Joni. In a moment, we'll have a question and answer, but before we do that, we have a little contest. So I need a volunteer to help me with this contest. Oh, Luke Hamilton, thank you. Come on up. Yeah, you're not hiding in those red pants. So here is the prize. Thank you. That's what I'm looking for. So this is how this contest will work. Luke, your role is to give the coffee mug to the winner.
Excellent.
So I have 3 questions. There's 3 mugs. I will ask this question. If you think you know the answer, raise your hand as quick as possible. Our panelists will help me select the person who responded fastest. If you answer the question correctly, you'll get a coffee mug. Easy enough? Very good. First question. Where did Jerry go for grad school? Oh, sorry, panelists?
Yeah.
William and Mary.
That is correct, William and Mary. Great job. Question number 2. How many Atlanta Braves games did Bryan watch this year? Who was it? Right in the front? That's incorrect. I think we gotta look more to the back. I saw something. I think green sweater in the back is who I had, actually. Right there. Yep. That's incorrect. Right there in the middle. Right there in the middle. Yep, you. That is correct. Jerry Logan watched all of the games. Bryan Parys, unfortunately, didn't watch any. Last question. What kind of dog does Joni own? Panelists? That's correct. Siberian Husky. Well done. All right, so we have a little over 10 minutes. We have about 12 minutes left. I have a couple questions for the panelists. I would prefer not to ask them, however. So for any of the panelists, a time for question and answer. Any questions? Yeah.
This is for Jerry.
Just real quick, procedurally, I'm just going to repeat the question so everyone can hear it. So feel free to ask the question. I'll repeat it.
What mistake in college
I like it.
caused you to learn one of the most valuable lessons?
The question was, what mistake in college caused you to learn one of the most valuable lessons? I laugh because Jerry and I were roommates, so I can think of about 30.
Does this have to relate to the advice?
Not even a little bit.
This is just, all right, Jerry Springer. I'll keep this is recorded, this is unbelievable, but I'm not afraid to say this. I dated this same girl 3 times we tried, and it was like, probably for both of us, butting our heads into the wall. So I didn't marry her. She married one of my roommates, not Keith, another one. It's that like twisted Gordon healthy inbreeding? What? As I told Bryan beforehand, President Lindsay's in China, so he can't get to us quickly if anything goes awry. My point being, completely unrelated to my advice, I think. Yeah, I can't find a relation, so it's just out there floating in the ether. But I learned that I had to find someone who was not just a good Christian person. I had to find someone who actually was kind of similar to me, very quirky and perhaps difficult to live with. So I had to find someone who could put up with me, who could give me great things like this and help me along the path. And I just I learned a lot from trying again and again, but sometimes it's best to know when to quit. And probably we both should have quit after the first time. Hung out with the bros and the gals a little more, and then found the right person. I don't know. Does that answer anybody's question?
I think so. Other questions? Yeah.
This might not be a question that I'll be giving us advice, but I'm curious. Bryan, how often do you tweet every day?
The question was, Bryan, how often do you tweet every day?
Since I want to be secretive about how often I tweet on the clock, right? You don't want to give that away. It actually comes in bursts, I think. And there are times when I get well, the people that I know outside of Twitter, IRL, as some people say, friends will text me and be like, "You okay? You haven't tweeted in a while." And I generally take that as concern, as like, "Oh, you really care about me? You know, I haven't come up with some ridiculous observation about a bee that tried to attack my face." In a while, so thank you for that. So yesterday was a renewed burst, possibly because I was working on this, and then it just, once it starts, you gotta watch out. But so I would say that there was probably a locus of activity once a week, and then it's probably like a dozen, maybe. I know that I'm about to hit 3,000 tweets. So I mean, 3,000 is just a number, but it's pretty, it's very simple. So I take pride in that.
I actually am going to insert a. Oh, yep.
I did eat eggs, and you've been reading Twitter.
The question was, did Bryan eat eggs for breakfast this morning?
I did, and it was sautéed, a little bit of unsalted organic butter, and some chopped fresh kale.
On that note, I'm going to insert a question. These are great questions. This isn't a. Yeah. It's for Joni, actually. Joni, you told a very touching story about your interactions with your mom, and then you mentioned she passed away. If there were one thing that you could tell your mom, or an experience you could share with your mom today, what would it be?
To a microphone. I think that I would tell her that she was the pebble that fell into the pond that created many concentric circles that affected many people, and that I'd love for her to know her granddaughter because she's so much like her.
That was pretty sweet. That was good. Cool. Other questions? I have more. Don't make me use them. Yeah.
This question for Bryan. What's your most irrational fear?
To Bryan, what is your most irrational fear?
Oh boy, I mean, in the sense that everything is immediately engaging, everything is also immediately terrifying. So that's sort of the converse of my advice. But since we were supposed to be positive, I wasn't supposed to say that. I already mentioned bees, so that's what I'm thinking about. I mean, they're tiny, right? I mean, you shouldn't really be afraid of bees. And a lot of times they're just those fat, like, bumbly things. And they're just, like, doing their thing, and you get in the way, but yet I will run screaming. You know, like, this is the kind of thing. I'll be sitting alone peacefully at a picnic table, like outside Lane or something, reading, eating, not eggs. And it'll come there, and you know, the windows in the back, everyone can see you. And so I'm like, it's this yellow jacket coming closer, and you're like, just don't do something weird. And most of the time I can control it, but then it like literally beelines, where we get this phrase, I suppose, for my face, and then throw everything and run around the table and flailing and papers going everywhere, and I'm sure everyone sees that. The reason why I'm afraid of bees is that I have a distinct memory of being 3 and climbing up a ladder and hitting my head on a hornet's nest. So I was talking about this memory with my sister a couple years ago, and she said, that didn't happen to you. She said, that happened to me. And so we had to ask our mom, all right, you know, Mom, when we were living on Jefferson Street, who's the one that, you know, got stung by all the hornets? She goes, someone got stung by hornets? So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I did or not, I'm still frightened of them. So I guess that's pretty irrational.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably, if you could name one person, who was the most influential person in your life?
Most influential person in your life in 15 seconds or less, Jerry.
My dad.
My 15-year-old.
Jesus? No, that's what we're supposed to say too, because I have to look better than you guys. But since we're going emotional, I will say my 16-month-old son. So I'll do that.
That's good. Yeah, that is. To try to gain some ground, this is a question for Jerry. We only have a few more minutes, but I have a very specific question for Jerry. Jerry, there's a few athletes in the room. Ed Reed. Is that Ed Reed in the front? Yeah. Who is 27? Ray Rice. I should know that. He's on my fantasy team. At any rate, Jerry, what piece of advice would you give to athletes? Jerry wouldn't tell you this. Jerry was a very good basketball player here. I played with him. He was better than me.
That is correct.
Yes.
What piece of advice would I give to athletes? Here's why I believe in athletics. It's because this actually works with the advice I gave earlier. This is brilliant. It's because you're forced to deal with failure over and over and over and over again. So that if you're a fantastic hitter in baseball, you maybe connect with the ball 3 out of 10 times. Or if you're a phenomenal shooter in basketball, you're only hitting about half of your shots. And every play on either side of the floor, someone's going to make a mistake. That was what basketball was to me. It's just who's going to make a mistake. So you're constantly learning to respond to failure. That's why I believe in athletics, because that then becomes life. Whether you're in your job, you're in your marriage, you're parenting, like that's, ooh. You're parenting, and it's just these constant responses to failure. And I've actually, through athletics and through having people tell me, it's okay, you're not ready, you will fail, that's all right. It's not, there's no moral component to failure necessarily, which I think we often emerge from perhaps a Christian school thinking there's this moral aspect to failure. No, it just exists, and your response is far more important. So I would encourage athletes to be introspective on their failure, and to, you still need to perform too. So be good too, be better players.
That's good. Very nice. What number is Ed Reed?
20.
Okay. A round of applause for our panelists.